94, temporary T-006-10, wolf status. Commission will discuss adoption of a temporary regulation revising the status of gray wolves, Canis Lupis, from a game mammal to unprotected mammal and other matters related thereto. All right, this was brought up and motion was made at the last meeting that we put this on the agenda. It is here on the agenda. And any commissioners have any questions on this item? We'll move on to public comment. Questions? Well, comments. If you have any questions of staff for any reason, that'd be time. All right. We've had several input. Move on to public comment. Just a second on that public comment. I didn't do a summary of all the CAB input, but we had many of them that did not take action. And I don't know if anybody had a summary of that for us, but there was quite a few no actions. Cabs, if you could, when public comment, which is next, please let us know what your cabs did. Appreciate it. Public comment period now open. Do we have any items specifically stating this?
Yeah, we had Don Moldy.
Mr. Moldy, number 1. And who's following him?
Mel Belding.
Followed by Mel Belding. Good to see you again, Don.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to be here. Commissioners, Don Moldy, Raine, representing myself. I think my view is that this proposed change in the status of the wolf is moot in the sense that the federal law, endangered species law, still supersedes anything you will do, and anybody that kills a wolf in this state will still be prosecuted vigorously, I would hope, by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for violation of that statute. I just wanted mostly to bring you some good news. I had to sit through a lot of wolf hysteria at the Washoe County Game Board meeting on Monday night, where it was alleged by several otherwise well-meaning sportsmen that there was a huge ungulate wolf issue in the western United States, and that all the ungulates were being destroyed to the detriment of the sportsmen. I took 5 minutes and cruised through the websites of the Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana Fish and Game departments to see what I could find relative to this great crisis that was painted as being present. I found in Wyoming, with respect to elk, that in 2009, last year, the hunters killed basically 23,000 elk in Wyoming last year. In the year 2000, they killed 23,000 elk. The numbers in between, 23,000 elk a year, roughly. Deer harvest in Wyoming, 09, 53,000, round numbers. 2000, 10 years ago, 53,000, round numbers. And the numbers in between are flat. Moose. Last year, 2009, 504, down from 1,209 10 years ago. So maybe Mel Belding will render an opinion about why that's so, but I simply point out that there was a gradual decline in moose harvest over the last 10 years in Wyoming. I have these numbers, by the way, and I'll leave you a copy if anybody's interested. On the Montana website, with very little digging, this is a November 29th article right off the press. Elk harvest well above previous year and 6-year average during final weekend in southwest Montana, which of course abuts Yellowstone and Idaho and all that. So it looks like Montana's not too worried about an ungulate problem. Idaho Fish and Game News, very colorful, August of this year, basically talks about predation and other things about Idaho elk. They manage elk on a zone basis. They have 29 zones in Idaho. Of those 29, 23 of the 29 zones are at or above management objectives as measured by the number of adult female elk in the population. 6 are not, and why that's the case is fuzzy. So I will give you these if you want one. I have an extra copy for anybody else in the audience that might be interested.
Thank you very much, Don.
Mr. Moldy.
Appreciate it. Oh, we have a question?
Mr. Moldy.
Yeah.
Are you aware of the U.S. District Court judge decision that was rendered November 18th? United States District Court Judge Ellen Johnson ruled that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's rejection of the Wyoming Wolf Management Plan was arbitrary and capricious.
No, I'm not up
And
to...
the court remanded the issue back to that agency to fix. Are you aware of that?
Not the details. Thank goodness for the federal courts. That's all I'll say. They're the only help we have on this. Thanks.
Appreciate it. All right, let's move on to other public comment. We had Mel Belding.
Mel Belding, followed by Bud Sonntag.
Good afternoon, good evening.
Good evening.
Mel Belding, Washoe County, speaking for himself. Thank you, Mr. McBeth, for those kind words, and also you, Dr. Moldy. Here's my problem with the wolf being on the game list, like being a game animal. And I've stated this in conversations with people at this department and at county game boards. I believe that when you limit yourself with negotiations, that's exactly what you're doing. When the big feds come down and the big bad wolf people that just love these wolves, and I do too, when they tell us that the only way we're going to be able to control these animals is by hunting with a tag, and the department follows that suit, I believe that's where this department is wrong, and as a commission you would be wrong in the same way of limiting your power of negotiation on how to control a wolf population. We only have to look at Idaho's governor to find out how frustrated that these states are becoming because of the feds. And this is a pretty passionate, as much as I love bighorn sheep and mule deer, this is really passionate with me because I can't stand to see the feds continue to chip away at the state's rights. It is a state's rights issue to manage wildlife. And I strongly support the commission in their endeavor to make this an unprotected mammal for those reasons. When we go to get the wolf, and they're coming, they're already here, the Department of Wildlife may not have their own employees that seen them, but I know they're in Nevada. And we're not going to get these guys with a tag and a hunting license and a rifle. We're not going to get them going out there calling. The way we're going to have to control these things, unfortunately, is by aerial gunning. And it's the only thing that's working in Alaska, and it's the only thing that's going to be working here. And this is coming from a guy that loves all wildlife and will do anything for any wildlife. But we need to protect those animals that we literally threw to the wolves when we reintroduced these wolves in the 70s. We had animals in the United States that hadn't, am I getting close, Dr. Lynch, the time?
Yep.
I don't know, but we had wolves, we had animals, wildlife in the United States that hadn't seen a wolf for 150 years. And we reintroduced those, and we literally threw our wildlife to the wolves. Thank you. Good luck on getting it done.
Thank you. Appreciate your input.
Next we had Bud Sonntag. Trish Swain.
Did you call?
Yeah, Walter Mandeville. I didn't fill out a card for this. I have one for a previous issue. You want a card? Anyhow, I represent Lyon County. We had the last two meetings, we discussed this, and our vote was to not deal with this regulation because it's a federally protected species. And I do know that they're a tri-state, some kind of a compact between Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana that allows a harvest through some kind of an agreement with the federal government. But I would suggest that we deal with this through the government until it's no longer a protected species. But right now, I think it's a fruitless effort because it doesn't make any sense. Because you cannot kill it or go to jail. So that was our vote.
You had a question?
that tri-state agreement is, well, I don't know whether you heard me explain that
Yeah.
to you, that the feds had turned down Wyoming's
Okay.
management plan because they called, so at that time, Judge Malloy ruled that that wolves were to be put back on the protected list. And so now you have no allowed hunting in either Idaho, Montana, or Wyoming. But the federal court has ruled that that rejection of that wolf management plan, which had some trophy hunting and some as just pest sort of stuff. Predator, was a good plan, but it had been rejected by the Fish and Wildlife Service.
Well, I just wonder how do they manage that? Do they allow landowners a permit to protect their livestock, or do they have to call in on Wildlife Services?
My understanding is you have to call in Wildlife Services to verify that you have
Okay.
a problem.
And they could issue a permit then, possibly.
All right.
Anyhow,
Comments?
it seems like a moot point. And I wasn't real familiar with that whole compact thing, so I appreciate your help on that.
Okay.
We had a Trish Swain, followed by Fran Apper-Nees. If I pronounce it right.
I'm Trish Swain. I speak strictly for myself. This has nothing to do with TrailSafe. TrailSafe is not taking on any other issues. We've got our hands full with what we've got, believe me. However, I feel passionately about the wolf issue. I just always have, all my life. And I have heard the presentation by Mr. Chamberlain from the U.S. Wolf Refuge. I think he's the go-to man with tremendous information and background in wolves. And the philosophical divide that you outlined so well, Mr. McBeath, I certainly am on the side of the animals. And from my perspective, if there's one animal that can be protected, that everybody isn't out there shooting, trapping, doing whatever to, I'm for it. And it's my understanding that wolves, 80% of livestock problems come from natural causes. Livestock death comes from disease, weather, or calving problems. It has nothing to do with these predators that get all the blame. It's my understanding that 0.11% of livestock that is killed is a result of wolves. Therefore, it is almost negligible. And so I don't see the wolf as a problem. I see the wolf as an iconic animal of the West, and I certainly am all for its protection. Thank you very much.
Thank you for showing up.
Fran Apper-Nees.
Fran, Fran.
And that's
No
all
Fran.
She had
I had, unless somebody,
All right, go ahead, Daryl, and then you, sir. Then we'll move to the back. Oh, there's time.
For the record, Daryl Harwell, Washoe County. At our last meeting, we would like to make the recommendation that the commission moves the wolf from the big game status and set it as an unprotected animal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir, I believe you had a card, right? You already did that, yep.
it probably just said others.
Yes, I'm Bill Chamberlain. I'm the Curator and Director of Operations of the United States Wolf Refuge, and I've been actively involved in wolf recovery and wolf conservation for over 20 years. I have seen both sides of this issue, both political, biological, and scientific. This is probably one of the icons of the wolf or wildlife conservation effort in this country. I will also agree that the wolf restoration has probably been one of the most controversial and one of the most successful programs in this country. What I wish to speak to you about is the controversy surrounding this animal. Number one, I'm sure you're well aware that it is obviously a protected species under the Endangered Species Act. The wolf population in those states where it is not endangered, Alaska, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, those are thriving, healthy populations. They do not have that animostic hostility toward the wolf, and that's why it has been a very successful program. I'm also sure that you are aware that there are no wolves in the state of Nevada, and there have not been for at least 80 years. That is verifiable, not only with Nevada Game and Fish, but many private and nonprofit groups. There has been alleged sightings, and I will bet my life that they're nothing more than wolf hybrids that people have not been able to handle and let go into the wild. The possibility of wolves migrating down from Yellowstone, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana, 5, possibly 10 years before they'll get here. So the dealings with them now is a moot point. The other issue we've talked about is they are an endangered species, so if there is a take here in the state of Nevada, federal charges will be prosecuted if the individual is caught. The other issue is if that individual uses the excuse that he had approached Nevada Game and Fish and they said it's a unprotected species and therefore you are allowed to take that animal, if he uses that defense, that makes the state of Nevada and the Division of Wildlife just as culpable as the guy who pulled the trigger. I don't think that's a position that we want to put ourselves in. So consider that. Getting back to what Trish said, of all the livestock losses in the West, of all the causes for livestock losses, 0.11% can be verifiably attributed to wolves. Coyotes kill 22 times more livestock than wolves do. Mountain lions kill 10 times. Feral dogs and domestic dogs 5 times what wolves do. They are not the vicious beast that our basic mentality of the public says. There are other issues, but thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming. Yeah, okay. Let's go. Oh, let's see. Who did I promise? I think I Don first, and then we'll go with you. We'll get everybody.
Donald, Chairman of Nevada Livestock Association. I don't know what you can do about wolves, but agriculture is very, very concerned about the wolves coming in. And as far as I understand the laws, if there's a law, a state law on the books, that's, you know, the federal government has to follow state law if the law is already here. And I don't know of any rancher that is going to stand around and watch his sheep or his cattle be killed. That's and that would be, I don't know, since there are no wolves here, it would be probably a taking if a guy got run out of business because a pack of wolves kept coming in. I don't know, but that I know how everybody in our organization feels about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming out. No. All right. We had, you had your hand up earlier? Yeah. Go ahead. One chance each. And then we'll move over to Candido.
Henry Krinka, speaking for the Nevada Outfitters and Guides Association. I took a poll on this with the directors, and we're not sure if we want to go with the unprotected mammal or not because we don't have enough information of what all that consists of. What we are sure of is that we don't want to have any wolves in the state of Nevada. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Candido had something, and then Mr. Casanelli.
Candido Mindy, Velco Cab. We voted to support it, and the motion read as such: to support the Commission's instructions to staff to work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to delist the wolf in Nevada through the Governor's office. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And followed by Paul Dixon.
For the record, Tom Casanelli with Humboldt County. I think something we're forgetting here is we had an olive branch thrown to us by the feds at the last meeting on this native range. They actually made a mistake when they did their reintroduction plans. They pretty much admitted that at the meeting. And I think we should really pursue that avenue. I know there's been a letter written already to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and I think we need to get Nevada out of their plan as native habitat. And that should be done first before we do anything. As we've heard today, the Endangered Species Act is going to trump anything else we do, and then we're going to have to wait until that gets taken care of, which is going to happen. The wolves are doing well everywhere. They're going to, eventually, these lawsuits and stuff are going to get thrown out in our favor to where the wolves have been reintroduced and are doing well. What we really don't want is for them to be put in this state, because we just do not have the resources that these other states, the wildlife resources, they're getting hammered right now. I've heard other figures, I don't know where Moldy got his figures, but I've heard some other figures that are scary. And what they've done to Yellowstone, where there's no hunting pressure, what they've done to the elk herds there. And I just think the bottom line is we need to get Nevada taken out of the historical range first and then move on to these other issues. Humboldt County has no heartburn with making them unprotected, but I still think the habitat, if we don't do that, we're going to lose the battle. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dixon?
For the record, Paul Dixon, Clark County. I agree with what Mel said. I think this is a states' rights issue, and I think that the way that this commission is going about this with delisting, we had a discussion in Clark County, may not be the most profitable way to head at it. One of the things that I received from the American Humane Society was a little note that went to my wife that said, hey, there's a Senate bill, U.S. Senate Bill 3864 out there that is basically to eliminate protections of endangered wolves in the greater Yellowstone and Northern Rockies area. This legislation would remove wolves from the endangered species list. I think one of the things this commission should be doing is figuring out how we get letters of support through the Department of Wildlife and this commission back to our senators to support this bill and make it happen. Because if that happens, then you delist it, you don't have the problems that we're talking about here, and then you work on getting this off of the historical range that you want to go on. But I think the most profitable short-term thing that we could do here as a state is get behind this bill and make sure it passes. Because once they're not on the endangered species list, then we have a lot of other options to work on. And if there's a U.S. Senate bill out there right now, we should be actively working it. And that's my only comment to this commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comment? Go ahead, Mr. Gardner.
Walt Gardner, I commend you guys for taking on this issue. It's a huge issue, and I'm happy to see you guys attacking it before it becomes an issue, before we have wolves here. A friend of mine in Utah lost 2 calves. His neighbor lost sheep. I don't know how many sheep, but they are fighting it. And if we can get ahead of the curve on this one, I think we're going to be way better off. I'm fully in support of what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any further public comment before we close? All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Then close public comment hearing and bring it back to the commission. We have something from Mr. Pearl, then Mr. Lent.
Mr. Chairman, I'm the one responsible for having this put on the agenda. And there are a couple of things I think that we all need to understand. I received an article a few days back that outlined the fact that Oregon has now identified 2 separate packs that have taken up residence in southern Oregon, verified that they're there. The same article indicated that there are verified spotting of wolves in the Warners in the area of Cedarville. And what the information was that those wolves had migrated out of Idaho across Oregon, probably across the northern part of the state of Nevada into the Warners. Those wolves have already been responsible for attacking horses and some other smaller animals in the what's the name of the valley there that Cedarville's in? Surprise Valley.
Plush Valley.
So they're coming. What we were trying to do was to try to be the tip of the spear, get out in front of the issue before it becomes an issue. And I don't think anybody disagrees with the idea that Nevada has probably never been a wolf habitat type state. We've had wolves that have come in and out at various times, probably just wandering and the like. But if they were ever to be established in the state of Nevada, and we are under the coverage of the environmental, or the rule on endangered species, then we could kiss one of the best elk habitats and best elk inventories in the West goodbye, along with many other things. Now, we're a wildlife agency. Some of the testimony that was given was on figures for livestock, and we have a livestock representative here. But we're looking at our wildlife inventory and all of the money, time, and effort that's been put in to build up elk, bighorn sheep, goats, you name it in that. And I don't think any of us are prepared to see that disappear because of a predator such as wolves. Now, again, there is no question that they have migrated out of the areas. What was supposed to start it out is supposed to be, I believe it was 150 pairs on the recovery list, is now at 1,500 throughout 3 states, probably into 5 states total. So the point is that whether or not we're ideal wolf habitat or not, they'll be here because they'll be kicked into this area by pressure of wolves taking over areas in Oregon and in California and the like. I commend the letter. What the action that we agreed to at the last meeting was, and this was actually the recommendation of Bob Williams, was to write to, and I thank him for that, was to write to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and request that Nevada not be considered in the same situation as Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. And in other words, that Nevada was not a wolf habitat state and therefore protected. Hopefully, that will be acted upon. I have no idea when. But our backup point was that we prepare the regulation that removes wolves as a game mammal and put them on the unprotected mammal list. I think there was some discussion about making it put a later date on it, but the whole idea was to put it on the books so that everybody knows that Nevada, the Department of Wildlife and the Commission are in favor of being proactive on the issue of wolves. And that's the reason that I asked for it to be put on here. And again, I have to commend the department. I think the letter was excellent. Let us hope that we get action out of it. If we are removed and this new regulation goes into effect, I think that we can go a long ways towards solving any wolf migration into the state of Nevada. Thank you, Mr.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Lent, followed by Mr. Macbeth.
I've talked to a lot of these states on this problem, and I was quoted in the paper this morning as, you know, the federal government should be less involved in our lives, and the states that are scared to tackle the federal government are the ones that are being lost. And the bill that you're referring to by the Montana House of Representative Denny Reinberg from Montana specifies any Rocky Mountain gray wolf in Idaho, Montana shall not be treated as endangered species. This doesn't include Nevada. This is for those states because they got legislators that are working for them. Idaho's a disaster with wolves. In fact, the Idaho governor has tried to work with them. Butch Otter wants the federal government to draw up a new agreement giving them a role in wolf management. They refused. So the governor of Idaho has said no state money, not one nickel, will be used on wolf management of any kind. The Idaho Fish and Game Commission did a resolution, and it's they have 23 points on here, and it's a disaster resolution is what it is. The Idaho County, Idaho, they have a disaster declaration, and this is a county where there's a tremendous amount of wolf destruction, and they went into an emergency disaster declaration in Idaho. And Idaho is being proactive on this. And one of the things that people don't realize, and they've got to look at stuff like this. This is a scientific paper, came out of University of Calgary, Canada, and it's entitled Effects of Wolves on Elk and Cattle Behaviors, Implications for Livestock Production and Wolf Conservation. And if you read this, it tells you that what cattle and elk and animals do when there's wolves around. They change their whole attitude. They don't breed, and it's a whole new ball game. And these are scientific papers that tell you the effect that wolves have on big game animals and cattle. And you've got to read these scientific papers like that to really know the effect of them. And when I read things in the paper this morning, and I'm going to quote them, by Bob Williams, who's retired at the end of this month, he says, as wolf populations rise in Idaho, Nevada likely will see more of them. But that shouldn't be a huge concern. Bet me, there will be an occasional wolf that comes to Nevada, and we certainly shouldn't be afraid of them. That is poison language. That is so ridiculous, it's unbelievable. Now, and so what happened in Wyoming and Idaho, Wyoming wanted to save their wildlife. And we, as a commission, are obligated to preserve wildlife in the state of Nevada. That's our job. And we got to tackle the feds. We should tackle the feds. And we should make these animals unprotected. They're an ungulate eating machine. And well, what the Malloy decision said is Idaho had a hunting season, and in Wyoming, they have a two-tiered category of wolves. They have them as predators and game animals. And up around Yellowstone Park in the northwest, they're game animals, and hunters apply for a tag, and that's about 20% of the state. And the other 80% of the state, they're unprotected and predators. And there used to be a tremendous, I don't know if anyone ever applied for it, tremendous amount of elk herd, 3 elk herds outside of Yellowstone Park. And they used to have so many elk in there, it was not even a permit. You just fly over the counter and get them. Now it's permit only for the first time, and in the next 2 years, there's going to be no hunting there because the wolves have taken them out. This was one of the biggest elk herds in Wyoming. And so Judge Malloy, when he made that in from Missoula, he said, well, wait a minute. The states can't, Idaho can't have a hunting season and 80% predators and 20% hunting, and that the wolves are go across the state. They got to have the same rules and regulations. So he put them back on the endangered. Well, if you just go back, as Commissioner Pearl said, it's a 105-page study or a court case in Wyoming. And Wyoming tackled the feds and said, sue us. And the feds sued them. And they won. And they overturned the Malloy decision because it was arbitrary and capricious, and they rescinded it back to the Fish and Wildlife Service and says, hey, you know, that's Malloy's decision is no good. So Wyoming won it. And you can win these decisions against the federal government, but you can't stand and be afraid the federal government's going to jump in and sue you. We've got to be proactive and make the wolves in this state an unprotected, because right now, if a wolf comes in here and a game animal is shoot it, you're in violation by Rob Bonamici. You're breaking state law. Unprotected, you're not breaking state law. And if the feds want to come in and sue us, fine. Now, with the DPS, that applies for north of I-90, and we're outside of that. So we should not be included and all this other mess that's going on in the other states. But we've got to be proactive and force the issue, because the 10J rule that goes for experimental populations is south of I-90, and that includes Nevada, and it says you can exterminate problem animals, and we fall under that, but we've got to exercise that right, and to do that, and we're obligated to protect the game in this state, and I'm all for, Wyoming's not afraid to tackle them, Idaho's going to tackle them, and Utah is probably going to tackle them. That's why I want to get a joint meeting with Utah, and they're winning these things, and so you can't be afraid to tackle the feds on here. And when you see things in the paper like Bob Williams, but he's a Fish and Wildlife employee, but that's scary for what the public is. But if you read what wolves do, and I think all the sportsmen have seen them, what they do to game populations, it's if you like to hear them howl, like the people that introduced them, and they started in Idaho and said, oh, we only want to put 30 breeding pairs. And then the antis came in, we need 100 to reproduce them. And then we need 200, then we need 300, and they go to court and they win. And pretty soon they got 1,500 reproduced pairs, and there's no game left. And so I would like to put on as agenda item for the next one, we can't take action, but I'll recommend to the chairman we put on, and we should make them unprotected. And I've talked to all these other states, they said, boy, Nevada, you better get on there, because the chairman of the commission in Idaho, he flies, and he's seen him at Harrison Pass, about 35 miles north of the boundary out of Jackpot. And he's seen them on the road. We had some road kills up there, so they're not far away. So we're better to be proactive than reactive, because if we try to do this after the fact, we're gonna have you think we're gonna have the room full today with bears, people. We're gonna need a new room to fight them off. So that's what we got to be proactive. And if the feds want to come after us, go for it like Wyoming did. And they had a good plan, a very good plan. And so this changes every day. But a lot of people don't know that, because that was just on November the 18th. It just came down. And that is a big setback for the environmentalists that don't want the wolves hunted. And I think we better be proactive and take a stand and protect it, because we've got livestock problems and we've got game problems if we don't do something.
All right, Ms. Macbeth?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't necessarily disagree with what everybody's saying with regard to putting them on a protected list. However, I tend to agree with Tom Casanelli, and when we asked Mr. Williams, or when he offered this issue, the issue of what should we do with their current status, he said, just keep it status quo, and we'll figure that out after we get something put together with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So I guess I would support that position, because I just think it's a little bit more conservative. But the other issue that I had with this is that it does create confusion. I mean, coyotes are unprotected, and you can kill them, and you don't have to worry about it. But you kill one of these, and as been stated, you got some serious problems. And so, if we are going to pass this regulation, is there any way that we can put some disclosure, either in the regulation or at a minimum? I don't know what we hand out to the public on unprotected animals, but at least let the public know that if they, even though it's unprotected in the state of Nevada, that there's obviously some very severe, criminal and probably civil fines, criminal penalties and civil fines that are involved in taking a wolf. I'd like to make sure we at least, if we're gonna call them unprotected, that's some might say that's a little misleading, and so maybe we ought to make sure everybody understands that that from a federal standpoint, at least right now, they aren't.
Thank you. Right now, as of course everybody knows, the workshop for this regulation. At the next meeting, we'll bring it up as an action item. One thing the ideas of having a notice on there that this is state law, federal law might might vary. Perhaps when this comes up, that might be a good idea. If staff could come up with something, a disclaimer of some sort on what would come out on the regulations. You know, as brief as possible, perhaps refer to the federal law directly on this issue. Mr. Cavan, you had...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question is really for the department, and that is this initial letter to the Fish and Wildlife Service sufficient to get the review process going, or do we need to follow up, or are they going to respond? What's your feeling on that, Rich?
Hopefully this is on. As a matter of fact, I was at a series of meetings yesterday with Bob Williams, and I believe he indicated that the letter had come back to him to respond to on behalf of the Fish and Wildlife Service. So hopefully he gets it done before he retires at the end of the month. But so there will be a response forthcoming, and we can see what to do from there. So.
I think that will give us a clearer picture of what our next step is. But I'd like to see the process. I'd like to be proactive as well and go as quickly as we can, recognizing that it is government and federal government.
Yeah, I think we ought to send him a Christmas basket.
All right. You know, as far as the wolf issue goes, you know, I mean, perhaps better stated is the issue of an iconic animal. It's too bad audience members left, but you know, I think we do have some iconic animals in the state of Nevada, and the ones we should really concentrate on being iconic are fairly well shown on the back wall back here. Desert bighorn sheep, mule deer, pronghorn. Those are it'd be the top of the list of my iconic animals right there. And you know, if we need to worry about protecting and propagating species, that'd be the top of the list. Of course, other animals, other species are indeed important, but you know, at the top of the list. Okay, is there anybody who hasn't spoken yet on the commission? And then we'll come back to second. Mr. Vogler?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I should have taken that class in college on philosophy, because this whole thing sounds like we're talking about if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound?
What?
Yeah, I mean, this is nuts. We don't want to recognize wolves, and so if we change their status, we haven't really changed their status because they don't really exist. So, and we certainly would have the right to do that, because it's at this point it's a mystic animal. It doesn't exist. We're not recognizing that it exists, so therefore.
Yes, sir.
Let's move on.
And the unicorn as well. Anybody else hasn't spoken, and then we'll get back to. No. Okay, Mr. Pearl, followed by Mr. Lent. We'll move on.
I have a question, and then to follow up what's been said. Brian, do you know whether the Endangered Species Act covers just Canis lupus, which is the gray wolf, as opposed to the Mexican variety, which is a different subspecies?
The last time I looked, the Mexican wolf was still protected. They have an experimental population in either New Mexico or northern Arizona, I don't remember which, and is it New Mexico? And it's not doing very well.
I guess my point is this: perhaps this should also include the Mexican wolf with the scientific name with it too, even though we don't have any of those here right now either.
Do we have do you know what that is? Somebody on staff?
I'm sure they can find out very quickly.
All right.
Second.
As an option, so just cover that. So as an option, for this is the workshop, and as an option when this comes up as an action item, we could throw out that other scientific name of the Mexican wolf as well as one of the options.
Okay. The other point is I wouldn't oppose.
Thank you.
I wouldn't oppose the idea of having a note basically on the regulation, if that can be done, which says that the reference to wolves being on the unprotected mammal list is a state rule at the present time. When and when or if the, some language to the effect that when or if he is removed, they are removed from the endangered species list, then this provision becomes operative.
Well, let's talk about the language next meeting. I don't know about that one. Okay, Mr. Lent.
You know, with Commissioner Vogler, it's a mythical animal, but it isn't if it's right on your doorstep. And we've got to be proactive. And right now it's a game animal. It's listed as a game animal, and we don't have any in the state. But if we do, it's a game animal. So let's delist it as an unprotected species in case we get one in the state. And I'm hoping that the Guides Association and all the other associations in town or in the state get behind us, because everyone's got things to lose here, even though, you know, George Corner of the Guides said that this commission, this Nevada Board of Wildlife Commission, is intent on killing all predators. I think that we're not intent on killing all predators, but if it's going to affect the game animals in the state, I think we're obligated to do it. And I'd hope that the Guides would get behind us on that, because it's going to affect all of us.
All right, are we done with this item, gentlemen? Okay.
Just real quick.
Mr. Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's obviously going to be on the next agenda, so I would just request that we, if possibly we do have a response from Fish and Wildlife, that the agenda is broad enough so that we can deal with that, because sometimes if the agenda doesn't state certain things, then we can't deal with them, and we certainly want to deal with that on a timely basis. So
all right, you can come up with some language that you would propose to have on the agenda. I would appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, please send forward to me. All right. Oh, so the only additions that we would like to see here is for this regulation comes up is the addition of the Mexican wolf and the designation that you said, sir, which was
Canis Lupis bellii.
Bellii. Canis.
Y-E-I.
Bellii, got it. And we can have that on there as well as an option. Any other options like to see?
Hybrids. There are people that raise hybrids and turn them loose. Do they eat cows too?
Well,
it's not on the endangered species list.
Let's
considered a domestic dog.
Oh,
that's an item that actually is on the list here. As we're talking about the raising of hybrids, that's come up in the past, and for some reason it never quite made it on the commission agenda as an action item. Okay, we're talking item 27. I'm getting right into 27, and I really shouldn't. Anything else? Seeing none, this is not an action item. This is an information item. Let's move on to number 15.